Howdy, howdy, howdy. It's Professor Victor Singing Eagle back again with more instances of indigenous intellectual education. Without any further ado, let me walk you through some land. This is the territory known as Wakanuni Tukiwuki, otherwise known as the Mount Shasta Highlands. Let me take you to the river. I bet I can't reverse the camera, so I'm going to try to flip this iPad over and hope I don't drop it. So, I apologize as I make my way through the bramble. This, what you see before you now, is beginning of spring, and you can see there's a knocked over tree there from the winter, which was rather harsh. Let's take you to the river. Now, a long time ago, before the newcomers came along and rerouted the river with whatever monstrosity that is, this was all water. This was all underwater here. And I suppose that area right there where those trees are, that was like an island in the river because the river branched off into two. This is the Shasta River. And you can see that they've rerouted it. This river used to be teeming with life. It had salmon, trout, turtles, crayfish, and freshwater clam. I bet you can't see that, but there's a little sparkle in the water there. That's a shell. I think there are still freshwater clam. Along the river, we've got cattail and all the blackberries you can eat. Yummy, yummy. You can actually eat cattail too, but we don't have enough time to talk about that right now. Let's talk about this beautiful area. As spring springs along, it's going to get greener and more beautiful. The trees will start blooming. And this is an ideal place for the Shasta people themselves. This is an ancient tribe. Here's some wonderful mountain sage. I should bring some of that back. But the Shasta people came here and called it home. And the houses that you see here now, this was a Shasta Indian village a long time ago. And that big, tall ponderosa tree probably has stories to tell us because it's been around for hundreds of years. I'd never tried to date it, but it's obvious it's huge if you could actually see how huge it is. It probably was a sapling when the natives lived here. And the reason why I'm taking you here, as you can probably already guess, is this land has stories to tell. Every inch, every square centimeter of this land has a story. Look at this. This earth, these blackberry bushes, those junipers, those ponderosa pines, they all have a story of the people that once called this place home. The Shasta people. Again, I don't remember what they called themselves, but let me back up and tell the story straight. You see, many years ago, we want to say probably in the 1980s, before most of you were born, there were no houses here, but one man, Potawatomi Indian, who worked his butt off all his life, put his pennies together and built this awesome house. And he brought along his wife, his son, and his daughter. The little boy, he might have been about, 12, 13, I don't know, maybe even 10 years old. He loved to plant trees, as you can see here. The trees are still growing. A lot of them died, but many others survive. And you can see some of them have suffered from deer antler rubbing and biting, which is why you'll see that they're growing crooked. And as they get older, they straighten out. This one right here, the crazy Indian boy is really proud of. He dug a hole and planted a little bitty sapling. And of course, the deer nibbled on the bark and rubbed their antlers and kind of messed it up so it grew crooked. But it'll straighten out as the years go by. Well, why am I telling you this story? There's a couple of the dead trees because the crazy Indian never stops planting. Let me tell you the story. Well, as this little boy was planting trees, the more he dug, every single time he dug, he found evidence of previous human activity. We're talking arrowheads, manos and metates and awls. That's A-W-L-S. Mano and metate is a corn or acorn grinding set. It's, like a grindstone and another little stone, like a mush pot. I don't know what you call it in English. We just say mano and metate. Again, I apologize, because as you know, I got too many languages under my belt. So I'm going to use the anthropological term, mano and metate. Over here you can see a deer. Those deer know us really well, and they hang out. I got to tell this story, you see. Go slower so you can see it. Oh, there's mama and two babies. I don't know if you can see them, but they're foraging for food because they're hungry. Long, long, long time ago, this Indian boy found this place to be irresistibly beautiful. There's Mount Shasta. Wakanuni Tuki Wuki. This is a new house right here. I don't know who put that there, but it's really annoying. Again, this house that was built by the old Potawatomi man was the only house here for many, many, many years. And the young boy who was running around planting trees was digging and planting, and he kept finding arrowheads and other tools that were from a previous village. This place was teeming with native life a long time ago. By the way, Wakanuni Tuki Wuki pretty much translates into it's so big, it takes a long time to walk around it. That's what they called Mount Shasta, the big mountain that takes forever to walk around. Wakanuni Tuki Wuki. And it's still covered with snow. Well, let me get back to the story. So the Indian boy theorized, although he's Potawatomi, he theorized as he continued finding more and more beautiful arrowheads. And these were works of art. They weren't just like, oh, wow, there's an arrowhead. Like, a lot of the newcomers come along and do that. This Indian boy could see that the natives who lived here put a lot of time and pride into the work that they were creating, these tools. Oh, look at the little baby deer eating, what is it? I think those are gooseberries. Or he or she might be nibbling on the juniper berries. Well, to each his own. Junipers are foul tasting. They're edible. There's some more. You can see the mountain. I'm rambling all over the place for a reason. It's hard not to. You can see the deer know me. They just kind of look at me and go, ah, shut up, Victor. They don't want to hear my boring lectures. Let's look at this land carefully. Remember I told you the story of the sleeping giant? Well, here he is. You might not be able to see him very well, but if you look carefully, you can just make out his forehead, his eyebrow ridge, his nose, his lips, his chin, beard. Way up there's his chest and his little man booby nipple there, and then reaching down, and then maybe that's his foot. And that's the sleeping giant. And he is one of the ones who helped build the mountain that we all know and love, Mount Shasta. A mountain named after the Indians that once lived here. What happened to the Indians that once lived here is a shame. I'm going to tell you about it in a second. But first, let me remind you that a long time ago, it was just that one house I showed you before. Nothing else. Nobody. For miles and miles and miles, there were no other houses. And all around the mountains, the weather is way colder. But this area they call the Banana Belt. Banana Belt means an area that's surrounded by a much colder area, or area that has way crazier weather. But one area in the middle of it all, which has relatively, what do I want to say, mild climate? There we go. And like I said before, along the Shasta River, it's very mild. You will also notice this almost looks like desert. A lot of these trees didn't used to be here. The newcomers came along and planted those, but you'll see that the earth here is rather dry and barren. You can see that, right? So there's not a whole lot happening here. So there's an awesome contrast between deserty, dry, and lush green river, which is perfect for the Indians because, as you know, or may not know, the water is teeming with life, or used to be until they built all those dams. There was a lot of life in that river. Salmon and trout and turtles and crayfish and freshwater clam, deer to eat, blackberries, gooseberries. So the Indians that lived here were not for any want. So they had a lot of time to enjoy life and tell their stories, is what they did. Well, here's some old garbage that's probably about 150 years old. As you walk along, you'll notice that. Well, here comes the tragedy part, you see, is when the newcomers came along, it was pretty much an explosion of newcomers. They came in successive explosions, to be quite honest, looking for gold, especially during the 1849 gold rush. And all these miners would come along and they'd get bored. And so they decided they were going to hunt for Indians. So they hunted Indians for sport, especially the poor Shasta people. I'm going to sit down on this rock here and just enjoy the sound for a second as I tell my sad story. So they hunted the Shasta Indians for sport. The Indian population, which used to be thriving along this river, was decimated, not only by the newcomer diseases, but also being hunted for sport. And a final act of insult, what the miners did was, we want to get rid of these Indians once and for all with a final solution. So, out in Scotts Valley, which I call Strychnine Valley, they invited all these Indians to a peace treaty picnic, they called it, or a feast to honor peace between the white man and the Indians. And everybody came, all the natives. And they brought a bunch of food and all kinds of goodies and laid them out for the picnic. And they even had meat, and they gave it to the Indians. But they didn't know, the natives didn't know, that this meat was laced with strychnine. So, who knows how many hundreds of Indians were poisoned that day. And whoever was left, they herded like cattle and marched them over to Oklahoma Indian Territory. And left there to die and rot. Shasta are not completely gone. There's not very many of them left. Like I said, population has been decimated. And all this, what you see here, which was once Shasta land, is now pretty much private property. I tried to, as a young'un, buy a lot of this land, but you know, as young'uns, we don't ever have a whole lot of money. I'm gonna buy it and make it sacred again somehow. Well, it's of course always sacred. But it's hard to explain what I mean by that. Make America sacred again. No, masa. What a cool hat that would be. Never mind, focus. So, you may be asking yourself at this moment, what the heck does all this have to do with Native American literature? Well, I'm going to let that question hang for a little while. Maybe I might even put it on a final exam. Ooh, what a great question that makes. Why would a Native American literature professor with a PhD in English and another PhD in anthropology focusing on Native American archaeology and cultures torture his students with a depiction of land? What does the land have to do with literature? Ooh, I like it. So we're going to stop this video here because you know how I get with all my yakety yak. Thank you so much for indulging me. You guys have an awesome day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Stop. Stop.